기자부대, hop on the beat!
This month we saw the release of the third issue of the JoJo Magazine. This began with its first issue back in March of 2022, and it's been one of my favorite pieces of JoJo content out there since then, often containing new manga chapters and short stories and some really interesting behind-the-scenes info or special features. This month is no different, and I think they definitely knocked it out of the park once again. So I'll just go over everything I can here, and hopefully you'll learn something interesting along the way. First and foremost, we have the cover. As I predicted, the focus this time is our new protagonist for Part 9, JoJo, and his stand, November Rain. The magazine itself opens detailing Araki's Hawaii research trip he took in preparation for the JoJo lands. His research took place on Oahu and the main island, which so far are the two locations the story has visited. It says that he visited some specific locations that he would use as the school JoJo went to and the model of the villa Rohan is staying at. We learned some more here about the planning stages of Part 9. As we know, Araki said that he had a basic outline completed for Parts 7 to 9 all the way back in 2004. According to this article, Araki already figured out the direction of JoJo's character by the end of JoJolion, but also points out that this research trip is very important, since while he has the basic structure of the story, he won't know how to flesh it out until he sees the location himself and finds completely new ideas. He says he learned a lot from people like taxi drivers and the behavior of the locals. One example is that he saw how renting a car worked in Hawaii, and then in the second chapter, the group rents a car to drive to the villa. He also focuses on the little details like the kinds of plants that grow there and what a fence looks like up close. One of Araki's editors says that being this close to the reference material increases the resolution of the story in their minds, letting them portray it as close to reality as possible. It seems like Rohan's philosophy of pursuing reality definitely matches up with Araki here. A lot of the time, Araki will also get sidetracked to things that weren't originally on the schedule. One example mentions him smelling chicken cooking nearby, and stopping to take pictures of the grill built into a converted truck bed. It notes that he tried to look beyond the places tourists normally visit, and find the real places that day-to-day people live. The writer of the article says that they were amazed by Araki's strength. He would wake up early, go for a swim, work through the heat until the evening, and even find time for a walk. The article also comes with some great pictures of Araki exploring Hawaii. We can see him looking through some lava rocks and stopping to take pictures of almost everything he sees. I can already picture some connections between the locations we see here and the ones that have appeared in the story. I think Araki did a really good job of capturing the local Hawaii atmosphere, where even locals have noticed specific locations appear in the story. This was a really great article, and maybe one of the best we've gotten from the magazine. Next is a basic overview of Part 9 titled What is the JoJo Lands, going over each character and the story so far. Pretty standard stuff which isn't new to anyone who's read it before. Then we have an ad for a mail-order JoJo shirt with the cover of the magazine on it in 2 different colors. Then we have another continuation of Hirohiko Araki's manga techniques. This was Araki's book on writing manga which he published in 2015. It was officially localized in English as Manga in Theory and Practice, which I would recommend any fan of Araki read since it goes very in-depth on his creative process. The previous issue featured a continuation of it, discussing how he writes villains. Here he continues writing about making characters with a big focus on Rohan's editor Izumi from the spin-off manga. We also see Izumi's character sheet, which was translated by the JoJo Wiki. It actually gives us a lot more information about her, like her blood type, height, and zodiac sign. Since this is the manga Izumi, she also has some notable differences from her more fleshed out TV drama counterpart. In the drama, Izumi had a pet dog named Marin, while the character sheet here says she has a pet turtle and cactus. It also mentions her boyfriend, who was brought up back in her debut in Millionaire Village, while for drama Izumi, her boyfriend Taro broke up with her after its adaptation of the story DNA. Izumi is brought up in the context of writing villains since, in a way, Araki actually views her as one. While not outwardly antagonistic, she unknowingly lures Rohan into danger and in many ways acts as his opposite. The main point being her role as an editor getting in the way of Rohan's creativity. Then there's a short history of the JoJo series, and then 2 features on all the stand rushes of the series, and all the faces of people being defeated. Then there's some more pages going over the history of Dio and his philosophy. It mostly just lists out what we know from the manga itself and Araki's interviews. I went over how Dio ties into the larger themes of the JoJo series in a video a while ago, which I highly recommend since I get really deep into the character there. This feature has a similar conclusion that I did, noting that Dio's birth in poverty in the slums of London gave him a desire to have complete control over his life, where he could finally attain peace of mind. The world is an extension of this, giving him the ability to freeze everything around him. But this wasn't enough, and he tried to go even further to reach heaven in a world where he would be above everyone. It also says that ironically, in his quest to rise above everything, he had to seek out a trusted friend through Pucci. After this is a section titled Who is Jotaro's Best Partner? It looks at his relationships with characters from parts 3 to 6 and how well they work together. This includes all of his allies from part 3, Josuke, Koichi, Jolene, and Anasui. They don't actually pick a single best one, rather each page asserts that they're each individually the best and lists out some reasons why. This next part looks at the various teams throughout the series, grouping them together and analyzing their average stats. These groups are the main team from part 3, the allies in Morio, Team Bucciarati, Stone Ocean's main characters, the tarot card stand enemies, the Egyptian god stand users, the various teams of Passione, and Part 6's Sons of Dio. Next is 2 pages going over the role of the stand arrow in the series. This is also mostly basic information about the different times the arrows appeared and doesn't really give anything new about its history. It also makes mentions of stands gained without making contact with the arrow, like those awakened through psychic links, born stands like those of Kakyoin, Abdol, and Scolipi, and ones gained from discs. The next section, oddly enough, is focused on Jotaro's house in Japan. With supervision from a real estate company, they try to determine what the property value of the house is. I guess I never really thought about it until now, but this house really is huge when you look at it. By counting the tatami mats on the floor, they come up with an approximate floor plan of the house's 3 buildings. They estimate that the site as a whole is 7,277 square meters, equivalent to about 27 double tennis courts. By counting the number of sliding doors and pillars, they also calculated the size of each building, with the total area being 250 tsubo. Tsubo is a Japanese unit of measurement for buildings, equivalent to 2 rectangular tatami mats placed together to form a square. Using a similar Japanese castle in Kyoto for reference, they scaled it down to get an idea for the floor plan, combining it with what we were able to see in the manga itself. They determined that if you were to build this house in 2023, it would cost about 1.3 to 2 million yen per tsubo. Since the house is so nice looking, they go with the higher estimate of 2 million. With this, they determined that the building itself costs about 500 million yen to build, about $3.5 million US dollars. There's also the giant Japanese garden, which they estimate would take another 100 million yen, giving a combined total of 600 million yen, not including renovating the kitchen and adding decorations, bridges, rocks, and plants to the garden, coming out to $4.2 million. Finally, by examining the location of Jotaro's school and the police station, they determined the house is located in one of 4 areas. By combining the price of the house with the estimated price of the land in those areas, the estimated property value of the Kujo residence varies from 1 billion to 13.8 billion yen, or a range of about $7 million to $97 million. The next articles go over the production of the CGI openings for the JoJo anime, followed by one for the final credit sequence for Stone Ocean. Then there's some pages dedicated to showing all of the JoJo books available for purchase, including the original manga volumes, as well as spin-offs, tie-ins, art books, and light novels. Then we have a brief overview of Cool Shock BT, one of Araki's old manga from before JoJo. This ends with mentioning Cool Shock Old BT, the sequel set 60 years after the original, which was published in November of 2021. It's written by Nisio Isin, creator of the Monogatari series and author of the Over Heaven light novel, and drawn by Posaka Demizu, illustrator of The Promised Neverland. The reason they're talking about this is because it's immediately followed by one of the main features of this issue, the second chapter of Old BT. I'll be making a video very soon going over this chapter in greater detail since, like the first, it is chock full of references to JoJo and Araki's other manga, but I'll give a basic overview here. This one is titled The Say Hi to Old Virginia Incident. The story is a retelling of Araki's old sci-fi one-shot Say Hi to Virginia, which is set on a spaceship where 2 men had to defuse a bomb. This story follows roughly the same premise, but with our main characters BT and Koichi instead. It's also set even farther in the future in 2060, with the 2 of them being extremely old. Bombs are placed on the ship which look like sheer heart attack and an orange referencing Oingo's orange bomb. In the original story, there was a robot character named Clyde. Here, his role is filled by their own robot, Echo's Act 4. Overall, the chapter is really great, and it's actually kind of an emotional cap on BT as a whole. Like I said, I'll be making a video going over all the little references included, since there's a lot more than that. Next is the third and final chapter of Rey Infinito, the short story focused on Lisa, which has her encountering stand users in South America in the 1970s. This started back in the first JoJo magazine with the Guatemala arc, followed by the Peru arc, and now the Brazil arc. I haven't really delved into it yet, but now that it's finished, it'll hopefully be fully translated at some point, so I can finally feel comfortable going over it. After this, we have a page just going over some of the unique automatopoeia used in the series. Then an advertisement for the upcoming Phantom Blood stage musical, which is releasing in February. I'm really looking forward to seeing this if it eventually gets some kind of home release, and I went over my thoughts on the cast in a recent video. This next section goes over which generations JoJo characters are in. For the baby boomers, there actually aren't many here, since most of them would have been born between Part 2 and 3. The only ones they list out are Alessi and Part 8 Holly. They also give examples of famous people from each generation, like David Bowie and Sigourney Weaver. Now this is based on the Japanese generations, which are a bit different from the ones we might know. Instead of Gen X, we have Shinjin Rui, or the New Human Generation. These include Polnareff, Daniel Darby, Angelo, Tomoko, Avdol, Poor Tom, and Kato. Some of the real people here are Bill Gates, Michael Jackson, and Obama. Then the Bubble Generation, raised during Japan's bubble economy. We have Kira, Raimi, Terrence Darby, and Diavolo. Then the Post-Bubble Generation that lived during the recession. Here we have Jotaro, Kakyoin, Rohan, Jobin, Bucciarati, Abakio, Keicho, Akira, Risotto, and Pucci. Then they list out even more, like Weather Report, Jangali A, and even Babyface's mother. Then there's the Angry 17-year-old generation. This refers to people that were 17 around the year 2000, which had a phenomenon of delinquency and juvenile crimes. These include Josuke, Narancia, Okuyasu, Mista, Giorno, Koichi, Fugo, Yukiko, Anasui, and Shigechi. Then the Yutori, or New Education Generation. These are people raised after Japan relaxed their education system. These include Jolene, Hayato, Part 8 Josuke, Yasuho, and others like Rekiel, Ungalo, Guess, and Carrera. Then we have the late Yutori generation, which they call Gen Z. This has Emporio, Daya, Tsurugi, and Shizuka. Finally, there's late Gen Z to Gen Alpha, with Jodio and Dragona from the JoJo lands. It also includes the Green Baby from Part 6 in this. This also includes a section about when Part 9 takes place, since it hasn't actually been explicitly stated in the manga. Here it mentions that Rohan's iPad is the newest model, meaning it could be set in 2023. I guessed as much by assuming that it would take place when it released, just like JoJolion did. Going off of what is directly stated, we do know that it takes place at least after 2020, with the characters mentioning COVID and there being a 2020 vintage wine bottle. After this, it quickly goes back to the older generations that weren't covered for the Part 1 and 2 characters and the Ancient Pillar Men. Next, we have an interview with the actress and model Eliza Akada. While she hasn't had any official collaboration with the JoJo series before, she's a huge fan of it. She says that she first learned about JoJo in elementary school from her brothers reading it. But during the pandemic, she became interested because of Stone Ocean and read the series from the beginning, which got her addicted. She says that her favorite stands are Spice Girl and E4C. She also mentions how with Stone Ocean, the women were drawn in a much more realistic style than usual at the time. When asked which character she would want to play in a live-action adaptation, she immediately answered Jolene. After the interview, we have an advertisement for 2 JoJo games, All-Star Battle R, which released this year, and Last Survivor, the arcade-exclusive Battle Royale game. Then another section on onomatopoeia, this time focused on romantic scenes. Then we have a gallery of every magazine cover that JoJo has been featured on. The next section is titled, Wearing the Golden Spirit in Daily Life, 10 JoJo Concept Outfits. Like the name implies, this has 10 outfits based on various JoJo characters. These are Shigechi, Koichi, Peshi, Joseph, Jotaro, Dio, Rohan, Trish, Pucci, Part 6 Jotaro, Jolene, and Johnny. Then we have the other news story from this issue, There's No Love Like a Parent's, a short story starring Melone and Ghiaccio from Part 5. It's written by Ballad Kitaguni, who has made many of the Rohan short stories. One of these, Kushagara, was adapted into the second episode of the Rohan TV drama, which is one of my favorites of that series. The plot follows the two on their job to assassinate a movie director who investigated the Mafia as research for his next film. I'm a huge fan of La Squadra, so I was really interested in this one, and from what I can gather from a rudimentary translation, it's a pretty good and amusing story. Next is a JoJo quiz section, with a group of 9 food-related JoJo questions to advertise the quiz book, JoJo's Bizarre Quizzes 500. Let's go through these and see how well we do. Question 1. When Jonathan was sent to bed without food, what did he eat in his room? Was it chocolate, a scone, or a sandwich? The answer is chocolate, which we see him eating in a scene which was not included in the anime adaptation. Question 2. What condiment did Joseph spray on the man who tried stealing the Redstone of Aja from Lisa? The answer is mustard. This scene also wasn't included in the anime. Question 3. What kind of fruit did Oingo plant as a bomb in the car to try and kill Jotaro? The answer is of course an orange. Question 4. In Tonio's spaghetti alla puttanesca, what kind of cheese is used? The answer is Parmesan. Question 5. What kind of fruit did Giorno turn the gun into to stage Pulpo's suicide? The answer is a banana. Question 6. What is Guess's favorite lunch set that Jolene ate? Is it the meat sauce risotto, the vongole spaghetti, or the cheese-flavored penne? The answer is the cheese-flavored penne. This happens during the jailhouse lock arc. Question 7. What drink did Funny Valentine chug? Was it cola, beer, or carbonated water? The answer is beer, which Valentine shotguns just like Jotaro does at the beginning of Part 3. Question 8. How much do the Versailles grapes from the Higashikata fruit parlor cost? The answer is 660,000 yen. Finally, question 9. What kind of coffee was Rohan drinking? Was it Kau coffee, Kauai coffee, or Kona coffee? The answer is Kona coffee. Finally, like the previous 2 issues, we end with another conversation between Araki and his editor, Ryosuke Kabashima. This interview took place back in September, when Araki was on hiatus and staying at Kachi Villa, the house used for the filming of Rohan's house in the Thus Spoke Shibe Rohan TV drama. The interview comes with a series of images of Araki and Kabashima around different areas of the house, many of which you can recognize from their appearance in the show. They start off talking about the Western style of the house. It was designed by Arata Endo, a disciple of the famous American architect Frank Lloyd Wright. The topic eventually shifts to cooking. In his author's note for Chapter 8 of the JoJo Lands, Araki mentioned that while staying here, he didn't draw anything, but they said he could cook, so he did. The dishes he made there were octopus carpaccio and cacio e pepe, which is a cheese and pepper pasta. Araki joked that since these are summer dishes, they might be outdated by the time the magazine comes out. Kabashima said that he brought wine so they could have a drink, but wasn't sure whether to bring red or white, so he brought both. Araki says that they should just drink both. A bit later, Araki makes some fried chicken. He says that he cooks several times a week nowadays. He used to just buy bento boxes from the store, but once COVID happened, he started to cook for himself. He says that while some people would ask their wives to do it for them, he says that he feels like it's something he has to do. Araki talks about when he first became a manga artist and moved to Tokyo, when he was concerned about where he should live. Kabashima says that he doesn't like a large house since it's hard to clean, and since you only have one body, you can only be in one room at a time, so really you only need a couple rooms. Araki disagrees and thinks that moving between multiple rooms takes you to different worlds and can change your mood. Araki goes on to say that the design of the Higashikata residence in Part 8 is also based on Frank Lloyd Wright. He says that he still makes floor plans for houses when they appear in the manga to have more detail. He talked about his trip to Hawaii and the different kinds of buildings he saw while he was there. Kabashima brought along some photos they took on their trip to Egypt in preparation for Part 3. With one that Araki took from inside the pyramid. Araki said that while the pyramids were big, the insides were really small. Kabashima shows the other picture of them in Egypt. He says that Araki looks about the same, but that he was fatter than he is now. They go on to discuss the Los Angeles Stall House, which Araki says was used in the detective show Columbo. Araki moves on to other LA architecture, including the near-future design of the city depicted in Blade Runner. The interview ends with Araki talking about having recently rewatched Prometheus and Alien Covenant. And that's everything there is in this issue of the JoJo Magazine. Once again, it had some really interesting stuff, and I'm glad I was able to get a bit more in-depth on it this time, rather than just doing a basic overview. This issue is also a first for having 3 new stories in it, rather than the 2 each we've seen of the previous issues. Of course, this one stands above the second issue for having an actual manga chapter included, but I do still think the first issue is the best for having the excellent Hot Summer Martha. In the future, I'll be covering the new old BT in more detail, and hopefully soon we can see a translation for the short stories of the issue as well. If you want to keep up with the channel, be sure to subscribe and click the bell. You can also join the Hum and Beat Discord to be notified when new videos release, as well as any important JoJo news. Finally, I'd appreciate if you help support the channel on Patreon. There you'll receive Discord perks and the opportunity to submit questions. This video's question comes from Sponge Cake. They ask, who is my favorite side character in JoJo? Well, this is a tough one for me since I think it's actually pretty hard to draw a line at who exactly is a side character in a lot of cases. And not only that, many of the characters I like are ones that you would consider side characters, making it hard to choose between them. So I'll just give out a list of my faves. First, I'll establish that a side character cannot be part of the main lineup or really be major players in the story. In Part 3, I love Whole Horse and Oingo and Boingo. For Part 4, I've always thought that Yuya Fungami was really underrated. In Part 5, Ghiaccio is my favorite out of all the minor antagonists. In Part 6, this one might surprise you, but I love Loco Barocco and his alligator puppet Charlotte. It's just so funny for such a random minor character, and I did buy the official merch. In Part 7, I love Magent and Dr. Ferdinand. For Part 8, I actually love almost every single character here, but I guess I'll go with Urban Gorilla. And for Thus Spoke Kishibe Rohan, we have who I think I'd put above everyone I just listed, Rohan's editor Izumi, who is not only one of my favorites in her manga appearances, but in her fleshed out drama version as well. If you want to submit a question, you can join the Patreon at any tier and ask them in the chat located in the Community tab. At the time of making this video, the chat is only available on the Patreon mobile app. On desktop, you can also just directly DM me your questions if you prefer that. Unfortunately, due to a change in Patreon's member post system, all the old questions were deleted. So if there was a question you've already asked that you still want answered, I ask that you submit it again so I can get to it. I try to answer one question per video, so I hope that you'll submit as many as you like. Thank you for watching. This is the part of the video where I thank my $5 and up patrons. Thank you to Alex Ramirez, Doorbell, Crayon, Rigovids, Zucato, Pumpkin Doge, Marrow, Almighty Quarth, Gatling Grove, Lime Jinjo, Sponge Cake, Cakext, Feliciano Rabaja, Rayana Meme, Christian McDonough, Navi, Emmanuel Etienne, Pulse Dog, Great Riek, Carmotrina, Hunter Gill, Adam Grogan, Zach Greenfield, FIFO, Rob Goliath, Jacob Smith, Professor Foosball, Ryan Ramirez, and Big T.